You were not invited here. The Duke of Ravenglass said it across 40 feet of marble hall, in the flat, carrying voice he kept for encroachers, and the woman standing inside his door with a leather case in her hand went perfectly still. She was in a plain brown travelling dress with the hem wet to the knee, and there was lime dust white in the seams of her gloves, and she had walked in past a footman who had plainly not known what to do with her. Behind Ranulph, in the doorway of the saloon, 20 people had stopped talking. Lady Pellou's eyeglass came up. "I have an appointment, Your Grace," the woman said. "You have a great deal of assurance. That is not the same thing." He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. "There is a door at the side of this house for business, and a day of the week for it, and neither of them is this. Good morning." She looked at him for the space of 3 breaths. "Good morning," said Miss Leonora Trask, and turned and walked out of Ravenglass Hall with her case under her arm, and did not slam anything, which he found afterwards he would have preferred. Mr. Hobday found him an hour later, and Mr. Hobday's face was the colour of paper. "Your Grace." "Was there? Did a lady call?" "A person called. Brown dress," said Hobday faintly. Yes. That was Miss Trask, Your Grace, of Coldbarrow." Hobday sat down without being asked, which in 11 years he had never done. She was bringing the executed counterpart of the Lyme agreement. She was bringing it herself because the roads are out at Sowerby and she would not trust it to a carrier. It was in the case. Ranulph set down his pen. The breakwater at Ravenglass was 240 yards out into a bay that had eaten 11 ships in his lifetime, and it had been 3 years building, and it employed 312 men of the town. And it would not stand one winter gale, unless it was finished by November with a lime that would set under salt water. There were 4 beds of that lime in the kingdom. 3 were spoken for. The 4th was Coldbarrow on the fell above Sowerby, and the Coldbarrow works held besides the lease of the only wharf on that coast from which the stuff be shipped. 99 years, 41 of them still to run. "Send after her," he said. "I did, Your Grace." Hobday swallowed. She sent back word. What word? That she was not invited. The Duke of Ravenglass sat for some time in a very quiet room. He went to Coldbarrow on the Thursday, in his own carriage, up a road that shook the teeth in his head. The works were 4 kilns burning on a bare shoulder of fell with the sea a grey line beyond, and a yard of white dust, and a counting house with a slate roof. He was told by a boy of 15 that Miss Trask was engaged. He waited 40 minutes on a bench in the yard, in his own greatcoat, watched with frank interest by every man on the sight. It occurred to him, somewhere in the 30th minute, that he had not waited for anybody since he was 19 years old. She came out at last with a slate in her hand and chalk on her cuff. "Your Grace, forgive me. I was waiting a burn and it cannot be left." She said it without a flicker. "You have come about the agreement. I have come to apologize." "You have come about the agreement," said Leonora Trask, "and you will apologize as part of it, which is a different transaction, and we may as well both know which we are conducting. Will you come in? The chair by the window is the sound one." The counting house had a stove, a wall of ledgers, and a long deal table covered in glass jars of grey slurry, each labelled and dated in a small upright hand. On a shelf stood a row of sealed tanks of sea water with lime blocks sunk in them, numbered 1 to 9. "Whose are these?" Ranulph asked. "Mine. I meant who made the trials. I did." She sat down opposite him and folded her hands. "My father took a seizure 4 years ago. He can speak a little. He knows the men and he knows the stone, and I do the rest. The burns, the books, the wharf, and the proportions. Number 7 is the one your engineer has specified. It is not the one he ought to have specified. Number 4 sets slower and it sets harder, and it will still be there when both of us are gone." Ranulph looked at the jars and at the chalk on her cuff, and at the wet hem she had walked into his hall with, and felt something in his chest turn over that he did not much like. "Miss Trask, I spoke to you as I would not speak to a dog. I have no defence to offer. I took you for one of the dozen people a week who come up my drive to be seen speaking to a duke, and I did not look at you, and I said what I said in front of my guests to be admired for saying it. That is the whole of it. It was contemptible." "Yes," she said. He waited. "Was there more?" she asked. "I had hoped," said Ranulph, "for a degree of mercy. Your Grace, I am not a woman who was insulted at a party. I am a manufacturer with 40 men and a sick father and a lease that is worth more than my life, and if I sign your paper I am tied to you for 2 years. What I saw in your hall was a man who will not be seen dealing with somebody beneath him. Such a man does not pay in February. Such a man tells his agent to dispute the tonnage, and I have no lawyers and no time and no name, and I lose everything. She said it as plainly as a woman reading out a bill of lading. You have not insulted my feelings, your grace. You have shown me your terms. Ranulph Stern, 9th Duke of Ravenglass, discovered that he had nothing whatever to say. There is also, she added, taking up her slate again, Mr. Crowder. Who is Mr. Crowder? A canal contractor from Whitmore. He has offered to take a half share in the works, settle my father's debt, and marry me at Easter. She looked up. He is not a bad man, he is a loud one. I have not answered him. Ranulph found himself on his feet without any memory of rising. Do not answer him, he said, until November. Why November? Because that is when my breakwater stands or falls, said the Duke of Ravenglass, and by then you will know exactly what I am worth. He came back the following week, and the week after that. He came with his own ledgers, which she read faster than he could, and with questions he had to be taught to ask properly. He learned to say hydraulic and to mean something by it. He stood at the mouth of No. 2 kiln in a borrowed coat until his eyes streamed, and Leonora Trask stood beside him with her chin up in the heat and told him what the colour of the burn meant, and he was more interested than he had been in anything for a decade. She never once flattered him. She corrected his arithmetic on a slate in front of her own foreman. When he sent up a hamper from Ravenglass, she sent back the hamper and a note saying that she was obliged to him, that the men would talk. When he came a 4th time, she said, "You are here a great deal, your grace," and he said, "Yes," and neither of them pursued it, and he thought about that exchange for 4 days. Mr. Crowder came too, in a yellow gig, with a voice that carried across the yard. Ranulph disliked him on sight, and then had the honesty to admit to himself that he would have disliked any man in that yard. The agreement was signed in September on Coldbarrow's terms, No. 4 lime her tonnage, her want in 30 days with a penalty that Hobday called ruinous and Ranulph initialed without a word. The gale came on the 8th of November. It came out of the southwest at 2 in the morning, and by first light the sea was going over the new work in white walls, and Ranulph was down on the shore in the dark with a lantern among 300 men. And at 7:30 the outer 40 yards of the breakwater went into the bay with a sound like a country falling down. No one was lost. He had cleared the staging at 4, and he was never afterwards able to say what had made him do it, except that he had learned that autumn to look at a thing and ask what it was really made of. By noon the Ravenglass Harbour Committee had assembled in the town hall, and every gentleman in it had found the same answer. The Coldbarrow lime had failed. It was in their faces. It was, Ranulph understood, an extremely convenient answer, because the alternative was that gentleman had erred. Leonora Trask arrived at 1 o'clock, soaked, having ridden 9 miles, and she walked the fallen work with a hammer for 40 minutes, while the committee watched her from the sea wall and said what men say. She came up the steps and laid 3 lumps of grey stuff on the table in front of them. "This is mine," she said, setting down the first. "This is mine. The second. This came out of the fallen course, and it is not mine at all. It is common lime out of Whitmore, and it never set, and it never would have, and it has been going into your outer work since the middle of August at 11 shillings a ton less than mine. Weigh my deliveries against your engineer's returns. The difference is 412 tons. The room went entirely silent. "Who authorized it?" said a voice. "That," said Leonora, "is not my affair. I have brought you your stone. Good day, gentlemen." She was halfway to the door when the Duke of Ravenglass stood up. "Miss Trask, stay if you will." She stopped. "Gentlemen," said Ranulph, "the substitution was made by my resident engineer on my works, under my seal, to bring in a saving I had asked him to find. He will answer for the dishonesty. He will not answer for the pressure, because I applied it." He set his hands on the table. "There is a further matter which the town may as well hear from me. In May this lady came to my house to conclude the agreement that has kept this work standing, and I turned her out of my hall in front of my guests because she came to the wrong door in a wet dress. Everything that has gone wrong on that beach followed from the same fault in me. I told a woman who understood the work that she had no business in the room, and I have very nearly drowned my own town for it. Nobody moved. Old Sir Marcus Pellew took off his hat, which was the strangest thing Ranulph ever saw in that hall. "I am ashamed," said the Duke of Ravenglass, "and I am obliged to her, and I would take it as a kindness if this room never forgot either. They rebuilt in the spring, in number 4 all of it." He asked her in April, on the wharf with the tide coming in and both of them filthy. "Miss Trask," he said, "I am going to say 2 things badly. The first is that I want to marry you. The second is that I want Coldbarrow settled on you in trust, entire in your own name, to your separate use, before there is any question of a marriage at all, so that whatever you answer me, you cannot be ruined by having known me. Hodday has drawn it. It is signed. It is yours today." Leonora Trask took the papers and looked at them a long moment, and he watched her read them properly, line by line, because she was incapable of doing anything else, and he loved her for it so violently that he had to look out to sea. "You have made yourself of no use to me," she said at last, unsteadily. "I am aware. That was clever, your grace." "It was not clever. It was the only apology I had left that cost me anything." She folded the papers. She put them inside her coat. Then she stood on the wharf in the wind with lime dust on her gloves and said, "Then you had better ask me now, before I am too rich to bother." They were married in June in the church above the harbour, and the bells rang over a breakwater 240 yards long that has not moved since. Mr. Crowder sent a very handsome épergne and married a widow at Whitmore within the year, and prospered, and told the story ever afterwards as though he had introduced them. The Duchess of Ravenglass keeps her counting house. She is up the fell 3 days a week, and there is chalk on the sleeve of every gown she owns, and the row of sealed tanks stands now in a window of Ravenglass Hall, numbered 1 to 9, where the household dusts around them with enormous respect and no understanding whatever. There is a portrait of her in the marble hall, hung deliberately opposite the great door, in the brown travelling dress with the wet hem and the leather case under her arm. Ranulph commissioned it himself, and stood over the painter about the case. And every year on the anniversary of that first morning she comes down the stairs, and stops in the middle of the marble and says, "You were not invited here," and every year the Duke of Ravenglass crosses the hall to her and answers it the same way. "You are," he says, "always. There is no other door."